Well, the Prime Minister has appeared to finally commit to bringing in the Stage 3 tax cuts in July that he promised during the election campaign.
On the Stage 3 tax cuts, are they going ahead and when?
Well, we haven't changed our position on that.
Just last week, Albanese struggled to commit to the Stage 3 tax cuts, which kick in at $45,000. They were an election promise, but he's been unable to repeat that promise in recent weeks.
Can you promise to those Australian families the Stage 3 tax cuts will come into effect in July in full?
Well, we haven't changed our position on that, Michael.
I'll ask that question again. Can you promise, as you did before the election, the Stage 3 tax cuts will come in full in July?
Well, I've said we haven't changed our position.
But can you promise, Prime Minister?
Well, I've said I can't be clearer than that. We haven't changed our position.
That's not exactly a promise, PM. It was a promise before the election. Has that promise changed?
Yeah, you can play word games, Michael. Nothing has changed.
Many on the left are arguing that the tax cuts should be scrapped, and there might still be debate behind the scenes in the Labor Party about this. But the rationale for Stage 3 tax cuts has only increased, with Australians being pushed into higher tax brackets, paying more tax than ever before, along with the discontinuation of the lower to middle income tax offset. Now, if you look at the actual data, and according to the National Account figures released in December, bracket creep and high income taxes are actually hurting people more than rate rises. It's quite amazing. Data shows that Australians have paid $18.5 billion more out of their pockets, 18.5, as a result of the rate rises, mortgage interest rate repayments. And that is massive, no question, $18 billion. But when you look at the total household tax take, that increased by $25.8 billion, a 40% increase. The ABC reported this in December, that interest rate hikes are hurting households, but there's a way bigger drain on our finances going unnoticed, your tax bill. All right, let's bring in now to discuss this former Labor MP Michael Danby and Deputy Leader of the Nationals, Senator Perrin Davey. Welcome to both of you. Michael, Albanese's language is that their position hasn't changed. I mean, we've all been around politics to know that that's what politicians say. Our position hasn't changed until the day it changes. I mean, you probably remember Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison saying that about the Banking Royal Commission. They kept saying they're not having a Banking Royal Commission, our position hasn't changed. And then one day you wake up and they've announced it. So, you know, this is still different rhetoric from the election campaign when Albanese was clearly promising these tax cuts. Michael, do you think there is still a debate within the Labor Party, within Cabinet, about whether these tax cuts will go ahead, given they are pitched as being for wealthy people, even though, as I've said, they kick in at $45,000 and they'd help most average Australian families?
Well, there is that debate, but Albo, I'll have to be very careful because people who are earning $45,000 in a two-income family are not millionaires, and they know that bracket creep is pushing down their real disposable income. So it's something where ordinary working families should be considered, not the sort of left-wing agencies that sort of love a huge tax take and bracket creep so they can spend more on their required desires. You know, what they could cut back on the massive subsidies to energy, renewable energy. That might save the taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's different ways of doing this if they have a budget problem. I don't think they do.
Well, they don't have a budget problem thanks to all of our taxes, thanks to exactly what we're speaking about here.
And the vast mineral royalties they're getting too.
And that as well, exactly. Perrin, I mean, I think those figures that I just spoke about before are quite astonishing, that bracket creep is hurting the average Australian more than rate rises.
Oh, very astonishing. And I think Albo's ambiguity on this, you're absolutely right. The fact that he can't categorically say that the tax cuts will apply from 1 July 2024 That's all he needs to say, and everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. But the wavering, the not answering questions, the referring to whatever his talking points on the day is, that my position hasn't changed. But as you say, we hear that from politicians all the time, and we've heard it from Albo before, when he promised he wouldn't touch superannuation, and he did. He promised that he would cut power prices, but he hasn't. And he says that his position hasn't changed until it does. And I think one thing we've got to remember, the people who are saying that we should scrap these tax cuts are using false economics. They're claiming that it doesn't help low-income people, but it does. They apply from $45,000, and it gives everyone on a sliding scale a little bit of tax relief so that it makes it easier for them to then deal with the rate rises, which is the other big hit to our back pockets.
Yeah, exactly.